Gotta get in the zone. AutoZone.
People are sick and tired of establishment politics, and they want real change.
Welcome to New Libs on the Block. I am Andy Smith.
I'm Brion Curran.
I'm Kristi Pursell.
Kristi, Brion, how are you all doing? I am just getting over a cold, so apologies to listeners if I sound more graggly than
I love the
normal.
gravel. The gravelly.
Or maybe you're welcome for being just getting over sickness with this gravel, depending on how you feel. Are you
I feel
both
like
feeling healthy?
It adds gravitas.
Yeah, it's like Phoebe on Friends and her sticky.
Normally you have to smoke
issue.
for 40 years before you get this kind of gravitas. I just have it naturally getting over this head cold. So we are celebrating this week because, as we had been hoping for many, many weeks, we talked about last week, the special election is finally behind us, and the DFL did, in fact, win that seat. David Gottfried is now officially Representative David Gottfried. But it was a messy road, but we had a special election later than we thought. But how did the actual special election work its way out, Brion?
Yeah. So David Gottfried's campaign crushed it, by the way. And the end result, as we know, he won. Not only did he win, though, his win margin was even larger than the margin was in the general. So he very decisively won B. And I know that constituents there could not be more thrilled to finally have representation for folks in Roseville and Shoreview and as neighbors. We are so grateful that he stepped up and ran, and so thankful for everyone who took all the time to get on the doors and phones and help him win, because we would not be here without him, and happy to have him on the team.
And correct me if I'm wrong, people might hear biggest margin. It's because just Democrats showed up and Republicans didn't. I believe this is a record-setting turnout for a special election in Minnesota. Is that correct?
I think it was.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
So people were psyched to get out. This is not just sometimes special elections are weird because they're not, in November. They're not on, the first Tuesday of November that people are used to and an odd, all that kind of stuff. But people were ready. I think Minnesotans and generally, I would say Americans are already really excited to change over leadership whenever they can get it with what is happening in our country right now. So I was incredibly encouraged by that outcome.
Yeah, it's really tough to get the word out about a special election because everyone's just so used to the typical election season and seeing all the different ads for all the different candidates and all of these different things going on. A special election for one seat in one area is very difficult to communicate. So the fact that the voter turnout was as large as it was is just incredible and just a testament to how much work was put in.
Which means, again, going back to things that we have done many episodes on, Kristi, what is the current count of Democrats v. Republicans in the Minnesota House?
Well, last I checked, there were 67 Republicans, and now there's 67 Democrats.
That's the same number.
That is the
and
same.
We're in a tie already. And I got to sit next to Representative Gottfried today in the Environment Committee. So I'm not sure which committees he would have chosen had he been able to choose, but I get to be on one committee with him. And Representative Lee Finke already signed him onto a bill for tree planting.
That's great.
He's
what a fun first bill.
I know, he's jumping right in.
I didn't even think of that. Fresh meat for a new co-author on bills.
Boy.
You said it a nice way, but Lee Finke was just faster than the rest of us.
Somebody warned David.
It was my idea because she passed the bill to me to sign because she's the tree lady. And then she was like, I'm just going to get 3 names. And we were waiting for Sydney Jordan. And then I was like, David, have you signed onto a bill yet? And he said no. And Lee goes, do you like trees? He was like, yep.
Did she say it like a pirate?
Kind of.
Do you like trees?
Do you like trees?
I was like, watch out. She's the tree lady. She's going to get you with her tree legislation. And he was like,
that's true.
Sign me up. So
that's awesome. I love it. Also, I miss that I'm not on the Environment Committee with the two of you. I'm only a little bit salty about that. But
yeah. It may be the next biennium, Brion.
Maybe. I'll keep putting it on my list.
Great.
I It seems so far away. What that means for the House, as we've said multiple times before, is now basically every decision that is made has to be in some way, shape, or form a bipartisan decision. Now, that's not 100% correct. Things like decisions of the speaker on the floor, for those nerds who know about that, still can be somewhat partisan. But for the most part, especially bills that will come before the whole body to be voted on, and obviously any bill that is going to be voted to pass has to be bipartisan. There has to be one member of both party and probably ideally several from both parties to be able to pass. The number has to be above.
Yes, because 68 is indeed a majority of 134 seats.
That's right.
Correct.
And we have been saying that since the jump, and the Supreme Court
Check the
backed us
tape.
up.
We have a recorded
Check the tape.
podcast, and we have said that many times.
Math is hard.
Math is hard.
Math is difficult. And we need
134.
to use the resources we have, like the Minnesota Supreme Court, to solve these difficult math problems.
Or I don't know, the chief clerk who has been doing this for longer than any of us have been alive.
Right.
Speaking of the Supreme Court, I think you two should. We have more to celebrate. This is not my celebration.
right.
Tell our listeners what you all celebrate.
Yesterday was a big day. It
Sure was.
Sovereignty Day, and I think is there 29 of us who are facing recall petitions. 29.
Wow.
They all got dismissed by our Chief Justice, Natalie Hudson. She
Yay.
said, absolutely not. This is not qualified. This is frivolous. There's no grounds for recall. So now we just get to govern.
Yeah. And, in my case, I don't know what other folks' recalls looked like, but in my case, the GOP opponent that I defeated in the November election was one of the named petitioners in my
Mine
recall.
too. Mine too.
So, Kristi, you and I get to share in this unique opportunity of beating our opponents twice.
No, well, congratulations. I'm glad neither of you will be recalled, and I will have you as colleagues for a long time in the House.
Yay.
So let's give like a quick couple minutes on what the rest of session looks like, because really with the recall petitions behind us and the special election done, kind of the rocky start to this legislative session is now behind us. And now all that is before us is what we need to do as a body, which is, I would say, kind of two big goals. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. We need to pass a budget for the next 2 years and hopefully pass a bonding bill to keep projects running in Minnesota, create jobs for Minnesotans, and help a lot of local communities. And we have until the third week of May to do that without triggering a special session. And then we have till June 30th before basically there's no more money allocated, which means there's going to be a shutdown of the government. So we have to do that at the very least before then. Hopefully we will never have to get to a special session, but that's kind of what the roadmap looks like. Anything y'all want to say kind of as we look forward? Obviously we'll be talking about that a lot more down the road, but now that we kind of know the playing field, anything you want to add?
Well, I'll say it's sort of like we have to work backwards from our deadlines. I feel like this is how Speaker Emerita Hortman has laid this out for us in past years, where we must adjourn on Monday, May 19th this year. It's basically the Monday before Memorial Day. So in order for that to happen, we have to have conference committees, and we'll talk about how the logistics and the sausage gets made. But basically counting back to that, I've had someone say, oh, now session can really start. And then I looked at the calendar and we are halfway through session. We are 9 weeks in with 9 weeks to go. And because there's a lot of time that happens, we have to coordinate with the other body. Our deadlines are coming up in 2.5 weeks and 3.5 weeks. And so this is really crunch time, because now Democrats have gavels half of the time in committees. So we're able to schedule and bring up our own bills to be heard, but we don't have a ton of time to do that. So I just wanted to bring that up. And the first year, the three of us new Libs were in the legislature, we did pass a bonding bill. The year before that, they had not. And last year we did not. So typically people think of it's either a budget year or it's a bonding and policy year. And in 2023, we did all of it. And it'll be interesting how we make it all work this year, because especially now, especially for our bills and our priorities, we have a more truncated timeline to get it. And I'll say that often the bonding bill gets left to last and is used as a bargaining chip because we need more than just a plain majority in order to get that done. We don't just need the 68 votes. We need, I don't know if it's 3/5 or 2/3 of the.
It's a super majority, which is defined as a 3/5 in our rules.
And so that's part of the reason why that has not gotten over the finish line sometimes in the bonding years or the policy years that we don't have to do a budget.
And we'll probably talk about this more, but like bonding is also interesting because it's kind of a mix of partisan, but also geographic politics, because bonding is like really local projects most of the time or regional projects. So there is scenarios where, maybe just use this as an example, like I might be more in tune with like Republican legislators who are from southeastern Minnesota who are trying to get stuff. Well, I guess Kristi, you're in southeastern Minnesota as well, but like, trying to get stuff for our region versus like the metro. Both Republican and Democrat might want some things for metro. So it's not as clean as like clean is a weird word for it, but it's not as partisan as some of our other bills that we normally work on. So it's a unique situation. And actually in our next section of the podcast, we're going to go over I'm Just a Bill Minnesota version to try to give you guys an blueprint and overview of what it takes for a bill to become a law in Minnesota. So stick here till after the break. Boy, my words are not coming out well. Anyway, we'll talk to you soon.
Good one, Andy.
And we are back to New Libs on the block. I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I'm sitting here. I don't know how like copyright like attacky is Schoolhouse Rock. I should have asked that before I started singing their song. But it's obviously A, very, very simple overview, and B, about Washington, D.C., which is different from St. Paul, where we currently are making laws. So we thought it'd be really fun to just do a really quick, or we'll try to be really quick, we'll see, overview of how a Minnesota bill becomes a law. So to start off, Kristi, tell us about like the basic idea, like how do you have ideas, or do people come with you with ideas for like writing a bill?
So I got asked this by my cousin who probably doesn't listen to my podcast.
Come on, cousin.
For a while, I listened to his podcast. So, Zach, you owe me. I'll send this
Zach.
one. He was like, tell it to be straight, cuz do lobbyists write all the bills? And I was like, well, sometimes. And so this is a part I was interested in delving a little deeper into. So there's lots of different kind of like origin stories for the laws that we make. Today in the Environment Committee, we heard about 2 tragic deaths of young men because they were doing invasive aquatic species removal and they were being suited up with scuba gear but not being trained or supervised or have the correct gear, and it both ended up in them dying. So sometimes it like is triggered by a bad actor, a tragedy, some event. Sometimes it is in a reaction to other legislation, or we talked about how Harry Niska wanted to make a law that reversed a Supreme Court decision. Sometimes there are groups of people. They might be special interest groups or lobbyists. They could be just advocates, people who have a certain lived experience who present a problem, and perhaps they may have part of a solution. Sometimes it's more work than others, depending on who the partners are, what the topic is, how much work has already been done, and how much work you might need to do. But luckily, the 3 of us are fortunate enough. We have partisan researchers that we can use to help do research and look at language in other states or other statutes. We have the nonpartisan researchers who are just an incredible wealth of knowledge. We can use the librarians. We have a ton of resources available to us, and then different folks who can put that into the language. But typically we contact the revisor's office and we say, here's the language. Can you get this jacketed for us? So part of the challenge, Zach was not like trying to throw shade at us for how we do our work. He's in Oregon. I believe they have a part-time legislature there too. It's the same deal. It's like, well, lobbyists get paid, 5 times more than us, but also they work year round. And so they are able to meet with, a particular special interest group. or a corporation who wants a tax exemption for something. So they are able to work on this year round. And because we are a part-time legislature, that definitely puts us at a disadvantage. And I think then gives some of that edge and advantage just because we only have so much time. If we're only in session for 4 or 5 months a year, it's go, 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 go from the opening bell. But yes, sometimes lobbyists write our bills and we just get to sort of give the thumbs up for it to be sent to the reviser. And sometimes the bills come from our own lived experiences or, constituents who have an idea or a project.
Yeah, it really does run the gambit of all over the place. And I think sometimes when people hear lobbyist, they think of the people who are pushing cigarettes on kids, which there are some lobbyists who are bad actors, but a lot of times it's people who work for unions who are we have this idea of how we can protect workers' rights to organize. And then we have legislators. Nonprofits who are we have ideas for trees or, how can we protect from emerald ash borer or, whatever it might be. And we can take an idea, we can always change it. And so it does depend. And then there are bad actor lobbyists who are hey, let's give tax write-offs for billionaires. All that stuff is possible. And Kristi is completely right. We are a part-time legislature, which means we only have from January to May each year for us to make laws. And the rest of the time we're expected usually to work other jobs or to have other employment, which is why our pay is, not as large. And we're not again, DC or Washington, DC. They work year round. They have different ways that they can put themselves on recess or not recess, but they're pretty much able to do stuff whenever they want. So they have more resources and they also have more time to do large, complicated things, which is great. I'm not actually criticizing that.
And a lot of staff, too. We each have half of one legislative assistant. So we share LAs, as we call them, with one other member.
Yeah. And all the resources that Kristi mentioned are shared. So partisan staff, also nonpartisan staff, and the revisers are all shared, which does lead to a backup because there's such this. I mean, I know I have bills that have been in there for 3 weeks now that haven't come out because you cannot, we'll get to this in a second. You cannot start pushing a bill to become a law until you have it back from the revisers because they're the ones who make sure they're in the right areas in our statutes. So it actually does what you want it to do. So until you have that, you can't push forward the bill.
I was just going to say the standard for House members is that we have one half of a legislative assistant, but things happen. There are job openings that happen. There are leaves that people take. And I know currently my LA is supporting at least 4 members and multiple, I think at least 2 of those members are committee chairs. And so that puts them in the position of having to also be a committee legislative assistant doing committee prep work on top of, the typical day-to-day LA tasks. So they are incredible human beings. They deal with a lot and they are, they keep us on track with everything we need to do. They're the superheroes behind our work for sure.
Staff is dedicated and so thoughtful and hardworking. They really are the heroes behind partisan and nonpartisan of what happens at the Capitol. So once we have that bill, we drop it in what's called the hopper, which is literally just a little tin tray that's in front of the Minnesota House. And then this is going to be important for you to track what happens. A bill has to have 3 readings in the Minnesota House before we can vote on it for its final passage. So when you drop it in the reviser, normally the next time we are in the House, it'll have what's called its first reading. Now, you don't actually read the whole bills because they're big, thick bills, and that would take probably literal years to read every single word out loud in the Minnesota House. They assign a number to that bill, and they say, this bill has a first reading. Usually it's bills 1 to 465 have a first reading, and then we bang the gavel. That means your bill has a number, and when it has a number, it shows up publicly. It's on the website, and it gets sent to a committee. And the next thing that a bill has to do, it has to go to every committee that is within its jurisdiction. And I'm going to toss this to Brion. What happens in those committees?
Yeah. So like you said, the bills get assigned to a specific committee, and bills might have several committees that they need to make their way through before they either finally land in the committee that has financial jurisdiction over that bill. So using the example of a bill that might have to go through multiple committees, Actually, one of these that we had famously in our super awesome trifecta was legalizing the recreational use of cannabis. I don't think any of us served on the same committees. At least I didn't serve on committees with either of you, but I'm certain that we all sat on a committee that heard that bill. For so many different reasons. And if anyone ever saw a physical copy of that bill, it was, I mean, I can't even describe. It was just a huge, huge bill. So a bill like that.
Literal hundreds of pages, everybody. We're not exaggerating.
Oh, yeah. I mean, to see staff have to walk around with this stack of paper that was just maybe a half of a bill, it was a lot. But each committee has jurisdiction over different subject matter areas in Minnesota state law. And so anytime a bill gets into that jurisdiction area, into that chapter of law, it's under the chair of that committee's purview if they want to hear that bill or if they need to hear that bill in their committee. Sometimes a bill has language in it that maybe briefly touches on a topic, but the chair of that committee thinks a full discussion is not needed on the bill overall. And so a hearing could be waived from a certain committee. And that, again, is the purview of the chair of the committee. They could decide that, no, we want to hear it, even though it barely touches that subject. Or they could say, no, that's fine, we don't need to. And so all of this to say that we have 5 months to get our work done from start to finish. And so this process of writing the bill and working with staff, and then it's dropped, and then it's in committee. But maybe not just one committee, maybe not just two committees. It could be a lot. It could be 6+ committees. And so the goal then, as it goes through committee, is to make the bill better, to offer improvements. And that happens in the form of amendments. That happens through discussion between committee members and, of course, ongoing, stakeholder input. And I think, most of us want to try to get our bills heard in committee before the deadline, because after that, we had talked about deadlines before. If a bill hasn't made its deadline into committees, it can essentially just die right there. So if a bill hasn't had a hearing by, I think our deadlines, you said, Kristi, are in a couple weeks. So if a bill has not made the progress it needs to in the committee process by that deadline, very likely we'll be waiting until the next session to get a hearing on that bill. But for bills that do move forward, actions typically that we would see in a final committee stop would be, we hear a lot this session about bills being laid over for folks who watch committee. And that means that the bill currently still sits on that chair's desk, metaphorically, and that committee could pick that bill back up and take action with it. And we're seeing a lot of bills laid over right now because our budget situation is just so unknown. And we really are not going to have a lot of funds to work with. And so basically then what's happening is the bills are getting heard, we're getting input, we're getting the language crafted where we want it to be, and it's laid on the table in a pile of bills that we will consider when constructing an omnibus bill. And, bills that don't have a cost will probably have a higher likelihood of being included in those omnibus bills. And this session bills with a high cost will have less chance of being included. Other actions that can happen in committee is the referral to the next committee stop, or a bill could be referred to the general register. And that means it's placed on the list of bills that are ready to go to be taken up on the floor for the next action to get the bill passed into law. And with that, I think I'll kick it over to Andy.
So after a bill has been voted out, because every time in a committee, there's votes of all the members of the committee, and a majority has to vote for it to pass through. Once it gets through all those committees, it has to go to the floor, which is where that's what we call when it comes before the entire House of Representatives, all 134 members. The final two committees that a bill will go through is called the Ways and Means Committee, which, like it sounds, they keep charge of the money. So to get through Ways and Means, they have to say, you have enough money that whatever this bill, if it costs anything, we can pay for it as a state. And it has to get through the Rules Committee, which Kristi, I believe, sits on, which basically accepts that we will hear this as a full body, because we can't hear all of the bills that are coming before us. Right now, there's like 3,000, and there will be many, many more. So we have to be very careful with our time when we're actually in the floor. So when a bill finally makes it through all of those committees, ideally it's in like the best possible form it can be. And that's when the bill gets its second reading. Remember, it's got to go through 3. So it's done 1, or it gets a number, it gets to go through all of the committees and hopefully gets better. Then it comes back to the floor and it gets that second reading. After that second reading is where we offer amendments on the floor. Now, as Brion said, hopefully most of the amendments to this bill have been given to it before it gets on the floor, like the ones that actually make it better. That's our hope. So normally what happens when a bill is getting amendments on the floor is it's actually the side that disagrees with the bill bring in amendments to show why they think this is a bad piece of legislation. So just like a real clear example of this, earlier this week, we heard a bill about a constitutional amendment that wouldn't allow us to use future funds to plan for the future, and it would have to automatically be sent back to taxpayers in rebates. Like we couldn't have like rainy day funds. That's a simplified version of it because I don't want to get too specified. We disagreed with that, we being the DFL party. So we brought amendments saying like, rather than, immediately just send money to like large corporations, let's say that if you make more than $1 million, you shouldn't get these rebates back because rich people don't need more of these funds. So that's an example of like an amendment that would be on the floor to kind of show why a side is going to vote the way they are on the bill overall. Now, sometimes in the midst of kind of this public amendment, there are amendments that are accepted. But for the most part, when they're on the floor, amendments that are given are sort of, for lack of a better term, message amendments rather than like substantial ones, because normally substantial amendments are dealt with in committees. But that does happen. I will also say if there's ever a time where any particular side wants to filibuster a bill, a strategy is to bring a lot of amendments on the floor. One time I think we had like 79 an amendment, one bill that people really didn't like. We don't always hear all of them, but usually this is where some of the partisan theatrics on the floor play out. But once we get through all of those amendments and all of those are voted on by the whole body, majority means that we adopt an amendment. But, a majority can also vote it down. And then after all of that, then there is the third reading, which means like this is the bill that is before us. If we vote on this, this body is saying this is ready to become law. And normally there are floor speeches. People talk about why they like it, why they hate it, or even sometimes like why they're kind of begrudgingly voting yes on this, but there's still some problems with it over the benefits. There's a lot of things. I mean, there's some rules about what we can and can't say, but normally we're pretty broad about letting people speak to the bill itself while it's on the floor. Then everyone votes on it. And if there's a majority, that bill passes, majority being 68. Now, I should also say, someone asked me this question on TikTok the other day. We actually don't have to vote on stuff. All of us can choose to abstain from any particular vote, but the number doesn't change at all. We have to get to 68 for the bill to leave. Now, if you remember the bill song, there's 2 chambers in our legislature. There's the House and the Senate. So just because we pass it after all of this doesn't mean that it automatically becomes a law. The same or a very similar bill has to pass through the Senate. And let's just imagine that they have their own process and senates and committees and all that kind of stuff. Let's imagine they do that, but there's like a slight difference between the 2 versions of the bills, which happens all the time, by the way. Then we have what's called a conference committee, which means that members from both houses, so several members from the House of Representatives, several senators, are appointed to one sort of mega committee where they hash out the differences and have to come to an agreement on what the actual text of the bill that would turn into a law has to be. If they reach that agreement, they have to get approval from both houses again, even though they already had the first approval. If there's any changes, especially, which there always are, conference committee changes, if everyone approves it, then it goes to the desk of the governor. If the governor signs it, then woohoo, the bill has become a law. It's a real boy. Did I nail the ending? I felt like great. I was okay.
What can happen though is that sometimes bills never make it out of conference committee, and that happened last year, right, with the tax bill, or did they? So sometimes the conference committee process is too difficult. And the year before Andy, Brion, and I all got sworn in, there was a $10 billion surplus. This is post-COVID, and almost none of the budget for the state of Minnesota and all these different committees, almost none of them passed in 2022. And that wasn't a budget year. Those were just supplemental budgets. So it didn't shut the government down or anything like that. But that was when the Republicans were in charge of the Senate, Democrats had the House and they just could not reconcile. So they never even got to that conference committee report. So there's a lot of places where this process can totally go off the
bills can die all over the place. They can be just stuck in a committee. They can be voted down in a committee. They can be voted down on the floor. They can be voted in the committee. The governor can veto it. And then we have ways to override it. But really, honestly, in these partisan days, it's pretty much impossible. So it's like there's a lot of ways that bills cannot become law. And there's really only one way for it to become law.
And that is a very sad time of year. And that time is approaching when we all realize which bills of ours might still be in play and which are done for.
And I will say, too, one of the easiest ways that a bill dies is that point when it's been introduced, it goes into the hopper, and then it gets assigned to a committee, and then it never gets a hearing. And it just sits there. You request the hearing. It's not a priority for whoever the chair is at the time. And if you don't get that hearing, there it sits until the next session. I will say, we described the process of moving a bill from an idea into law, and we have to do all of that with a partner in the Senate. And that in itself sometimes has to be a really strategic process. And so, Kristi mentioned a good reason why. Maybe, we don't know sometimes that an author in the Senate we chose maybe wasn't the best choice. But sometimes we have real reasons that we choose to partner with a senator or choose not to. And I've had to tell, partners, like you said, we have had advocacy groups come with some really great bills, and they say, yeah, this sounds awesome. I think I'm interested in being a chief author. Who's your Senate author? And I've had this happen before where they told me it. I was like, well, I love this bill. It is doing great work. I am still going to carry it, but I need you to know something about the author in the Senate. And it was a case where, that particular senator had made some really gross remarks about millennial progressive women. And, it's like, I will do my job and I will carry this bill and we'll do the right thing. But just be mindful that some of those relationships can be very delicate. And also, reasons for us to be mindful about things we might say and, be able to take the heat if we're making comments about somebody who becomes a co-author.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this whole process is not a squeaky, effective machine. I mean, it is messy and there's a lot of personality involved and there's a lot of history and there's a lot of stuff that happens. But as Kristi said, it's supposed to be hard because it should be hard to make a law, because law is sort of the foundation, it is the foundation of our society. So we don't want to just be able to willy-nilly, throw some kind of law out there. And with that, that's our I'm Just a Bill segment, Minnesota edition. So we're going to take a quick break and come back and do a game.
Oh, boy.
So we are going to pick our own New Libs on the Block March Madness, but with a twist. This is a cooperative game / choosing bracket. So we are going to choose the South bracket in the NCAA men's basketball tournament, but you are going to choose them based solely on the team names of the universities that are involved. So I'm not even going to tell you what the universities are.
For Andy, just so you know, this is how I always do it. So this is great.
Oh, excellent. So I'm not going to tell you guys what criteria you use. You guys just have to come up with this. I don't know if you want like them fighting or just the ones you like better. Totally up to you. I forgot a pen. 1 second. It's good podcasting. Okay. Are you all ready? For those following along at home, we are going to choose the South bracket because I thought it had the most fun potential matchups of mascots.
Oh,
all
wait, we're not doing all 4 brackets.
We're not doing all 64 teams. We're just doing one quarter of the bracket because I thought this would be a 14-hour podcast, although it would probably be very, very interesting. But I don't have the stamina for such things. All right, everybody ready? Tigers versus the Red Flash.
Ooh, I don't know what the Red Flash alludes to.
I don't know, but I'm kind of intrigued and I kind of want to say Red Flash.
Okay.
What do you think it refers to, Kristi? First thing that comes to your mind? 1, 2, 3, go.
I'm thinking of like a red-winged blackbird where like they open their wings and then you get the flash of the orange. That's like the only way that word makes any sense to me.
Wow, that's not what I was. That's great. Okay. So you guys are choosing the red flash.
Yeah.
It's a big upset in the actual bracket. I'm very proud of you guys. All right, Battle of the Birds, Blue Jays versus the Cardinals.
Those are both asshole birds.
What?
Whoa, shots fired.
Okay, so I know that Blue Jays are assholes. Tell me why Cardinals are assholes.
Didn't think
they're
this
not
is where this was going to go.
they're not as big of a-holes as Blue Jays, but they're still pretty like bossy pants. There's a lot of drama with both Cardinals and Blue Jays.
Wow. Andy,
But
did
Blue
you know
Jays-
what you were getting yourself into?
Blue Jays are bigger.
In no world did I think we were going to talk about asshole birds. But
Okay.
you have to choose one to win.
I mean, Blue Jays are jerk faces, so they'll
Cardinals?
probably win.
So you're
Oh,
saying they're winning. Whoa, very different.
different wavelengths, Kristi.
I mean, let's pick them, and then if they win, we're happy, and if they lose, we're also happy because they're dicks.
Okay. Blue Jays.
I don't understand that reasoning, but fine. Blue Jays are moving on. Wolverines versus Tritons.
Ooh, Wolverines.
Yeah,
Wolverines.
Wolverine. Yes,
Okay.
Wolverine.
Wolverines, excellent.
Pick the fuzzy puppy. Yeah.
Aggies versus Bulldogs. I don't think Wolverines are fuzzy puppies.
Well, compared to a Triton, they are, Andy.
Aggies, Bulldogs.
What's an Aggie? Someone who does agriculture.
Mm.
I
I
feel
know
like this
how.
is better if I don't describe what it is.
I know all three of us like to pander and talk about agriculture, but because I don't really know what that is. I want to root for the other one.
Bulldogs.
Yeah.
Yeah, more fuzzy puppies. We go with
Yeah,
the puppies.
Let's go
I'm
with the
gonna put
puppy.
Kristi Pursell down as anti-agriculture. Bulldogs. It is people who study agriculture, so you just cause them to lose to a dog. Yeah, Texas A&M. No longer in the tournament, according to you. Here we go. Rebels versus Aztecs.
Ooh.
Rebels
Both
is
potentially
really,
problematic.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. The Rebels is like white supremacist. So there's that, and the Aztecs. At least
Not
the
the
Aztecs.
actual team. Just the words rebels versus
Yes.
Aztec in
Yes.
that context.
Yeah. Well, and I think the Aztecs are like the original people, one of the original peoples in the Americas. So like they're OG. Let's pick
Mhm.
them.
Obviously. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Aztecs. Good. Cyclones versus Bison.
Ooh. This is a tough one for me.
It could go either way.
They're very Midwest things.
Cyclones,
And Great Plains.
bison. I mean, if it's a cyclone v bison, I guess my money's on the cyclone.
I wouldn't argue with that. We'll go with
Okay.
Cyclones.
Cyclones for the win. Golden Eagles versus Lobos.
Ooh. I mean, if there's a wolf and a bird going head to head, yeah, it's also sort of no contest. I feel like the wolf's gonna.
Oh, that's not. I thought you were going to go with the eagle. Okay.
No, we pick the fuzzy puppy again.
I was gonna say like we're going for the cutthroat, like who
Yeah,
would
right.
win in a fight?
Real
No,
different. I
And
think
Brion said-
eagles can fly. Anyway, I'm not involved in this. Spartans and Bulldogs.
Oh, my high school mascot was a Spartan.
Really? Thinking of the Spartans from SNL. While I love them very much, I don't see them winning a basketball game. Yeah, I know that's not who's playing, but this is where my mind goes.
Yes, that skit
This
was
is the kind of
on
good dialogue
while-
I was hoping this was going to really generate.
That skit was while I myself was a Mayo Spartan, and we thought that was pretty nifty on Saturday
Hey,
night
what city is the Mayo Spartans from?
in Rochester.
That's right.
Andy, you're not in this game.
Yeah. So are you choosing the Spartans?
What was our other
The
option?
Bulldogs?
Bulldogs.
Oh, let's go more fuzzy puppies.
Yeah, we go with the fuzzy puppies again.
I feel like I'm effing this bracket up for you, Brion.
All right.
Sorry.
No,
Red
not at
Flash
all.
versus Blue Jays. We're on to the second round now.
I'd say red flash.
Red Flash.
Red Flash. You guys are going big. I love this. Bulldogs versus Wolverines. Two, quote, fuzzy puppies, according to Brion.
Brion, I feel like we have to choose the Wolverine because otherwise Bulldog versus Bulldog is going to be way too confusing.
Yeah.
Wolverines. Aztecs versus Cyclones.
You know, I'm going to go with Aztecs. I think I have to go with Aztecs on this again. Kristi?
I support. Take that Cyclone out.
Yeah.
All right. Bulldogs versus Lobos. Again, sort of dog-ish fighting.
I mean, I got to go Wolf.
Wow, if you're not watching on YouTube, there's some pained expressions trying to choose between these two.
It's tough when you know nothing about sports,
Be clear,
Andy.
Lobos, they're not the Wolves, Lobos.
Sorry, Lobos.
Yeah, Lobos.
Lobos.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to pressure you one way or the other. I just wanted to say, okay, we're in the final four now of this side of the bracket. Red Flash or Wolverines?
I don't know. Wolverine's a cool superhero.
Yeah, Wolverines.
Yes. All right. Aztecs or Lobos?
Man v. dog. What do we do?
Oh, man.
Well, do we want the final to be Wolverine versus Wolf? Or do we want the final to be... Wait, what would the other option be?
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Wolverine.
Aztecs or Lobos are going to face off against the Wolverine. Is that a Lobos?
That was...
Speaking of Lobos and fuzzy puppies, please don't mind the dogs playing in the background.
They're ready for your attention.
They're ready. Yeah.
I don't want to make this decision.
Okay, I think
I like
will
to
choose...
executively make the decision that I do not want to make this decision.
I'm gonna go Aztecs again.
Boy, you guys were really pained about that one. Which brings about one of these two teams gets to go to the final four. Wolverines versus Aztecs.
Who's the winner, Kristi?
I did not think you guys were going to be as emotionally invested as you are, and I'm really proud of you guys.
Wolverine, because my friend writes those comics and up the Wolverine podcast and stuff.
The Wolverine. Got it.
Yeah. Okay. Like Marvel. We're going to go, this is for you, Ben Percy. Go Wolverines.
Way to go, Ben. Are you, Brion, this
Fuzzy
is a team.
puppy.
Are you acquiescing?
Fuzzy puppy can win.
Wolverines! All right. I'm very happy with this. Do you guys know what team name the Wolverines are? This is probably like one of the most famous.
This Michigan?
University of Michigan, yes.
Why are they in the Southwest?
Where Andy was born. Fun fact. I was born on the campus of the University of Michigan.
Oh. In where? What city?
Come on. Lansing. That's where Michigan State are. The Spartans, which you guys chose to lose early on to the Bulldogs. Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Ann Arbor. Okay. I've only been to the UP.
So when we get this 100% right, because we are so knowledgeable about the sports ball, what do we win, Andy?
What do we get?
You get $1 million that I will pay for you personally.
Oh my gosh.
You know why
and by
I can confidently say that? Because the Red Flash is the 16 seed going against Auburn Tigers, who are like the second best team in the country. So I don't think this is going to last. But
just so gleeful about that. Just so sure of yourself. Just so cocky.
Yeah.
You don't know. That Red Flash might take it all this year.
Maybe.
Well, if they win it all, you guys would also be wrong because you said that they would lose to the Blue Jays. No, to the Wolverines. So,
well, yeah, they didn't make it all the way to the end, but they had a good run. Still historic.
You're already giving them the historic run. I love it.
That's right.
Love it. Okay. You have now heard the great wisdom of the new Libs on the block, especially about your NCAA bracket. Now it is your turn. Go out on the block.
Bye.
That was everything I had hoped it would be.
No.